Principal funding for the following program has been provided by Consolidated Edison Company of New York, Forbes Magazine, Deloitte & Touche, the Blackstone Group, Brooklyn Union Gas, Donaldson Lufkin and Jenrette, and the Equitable Life Assurance Society of the United States.
Hello, I'm Chuck Scarborough. Welcome to this public television special for all of us who live and work in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut metropolitan region. This program looks toward the future. As the millennium approaches, how prepared is our region to meet the challenges of the 21st century? What kind of future are we building for our children?
I think we are a region at risk. And we're a region at risk because we are not attending to the maintenance of our home.
There was a time when this region used to be a model that the world flocked to emulate. That doesn't happen so much anymore.
By the time my children are ready to enjoy the dream, there will be no dream. This will not be a first-class, world-class region.
In 1929, we had the first regional plan, and that really laid the foundation for 2 generations of growth. And we put in rails, we put in roads, we put in parks, and we've been living off that legacy. And we can't continue to do that. We have to have a new plan. We are a region at risk.
A plan for our future, examining a long-range, comprehensive blueprint for the tri-state area, and a call to action to recapture the promise of the region. The tri-state region. During this program, you'll be hearing that quite a bit. But what does it mean? Our region is made up of more than 20 million people, living and working within about 100 miles of New York City, in 750 towns, villages, and cities in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. If our region were a country, we would have the world's 6th largest economy, about the same as Canada. For hundreds of years, this region has been a magnet for many of the world's best minds, and the destination of choice for millions of people. This is the artistic, communications, and financial capital of the world. While the metropolitan region has enormous strengths, it is also increasingly challenged to provide both economic opportunities and a high standard of living for all who live and work here. During this broadcast, we're going to look at the problems that threaten our future, and at some proposed solutions contained in a major report just released by the Regional Plan Association. RPA, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, is the nation's oldest and most prestigious regional planning group. For the last 75 years, RPA has been helping to shape our region, proposing ways to enhance what is so unique and wonderful about this part of the country, and at the same time, addressing the major social, environmental, and economic issues that we face. Previous plans resulted in the creation of many of the metropolitan area's systems of transportation and major efforts to protect our environment. Some examples include plans for building the Verrazano and George Washington bridges, starting New Jersey Transit, and creating Jones Beach State Park. RPA has also been instrumental in the revitalization of suburban centers, such as Stamford, Connecticut, and New Brunswick, New Jersey.
Our greatest strength has always been our people. Our cultural diversity, the variety of people that we have, the opportunity that we've offered people. Now we are at risk because we may not be able to offer people the economic opportunity, the fairness, the quality of life that they need to live and work and raise their families.
Thinking about the odds that I'd be visiting my children in 10 or 20 years when they lived in North Carolina or when they lived in Atlanta instead of living in New York, and how that was wrong, because this area has always been the area that has attracted people not just from around the country but from around the world, because we represented not just freedom but opportunity.
There was also competition from within.
We have New Jersey competing against New York, Connecticut competing against New Jersey or competing against New York, because what we're doing is we're just fighting within the region. And it's the region as a whole that must grow and prosper to survive in the world economy.
We're in an area of slow growth. We've got urban problems that are very significant. We've got to deal with the 21st century, which is coming at us. And we have got to stop fighting each other within the region in order to deal with these issues.
RPA's plan challenges the region to fuel economic growth in our urban centers, to integrate the region's fragmented rail systems, to preserve open spaces, and to create a new era of cooperation among governments.
Our arts and our culture are regional. Our transportation system is regional. Our economy is regional. And every businessman and every working person and every labor union in this region knows it. So we have to begin to think and act outside, transcending the normal political boundaries. And we need our mayors and our governors to realize that.
If one of the surrounding states was to do something that was in their economic self-interest, but have a devastating impact on Manhattan, they would very, very shortly have a devastating impact on themselves. It's like hurting someone in your own family.
The third regional plan is clearly going to be a basis for very active discussion. I mean, the first two yielded things like NJ Transit. I mean, there were a lot of real things that grew out of it because governments took the time to look at it and to have the discussions and not to be afraid of discussing some controversial things. And there are going to be some controversial things. Anytime you try to do things differently, you get somebody who's upset about it.
I've studied some of the old plans that the RPA has put out, and many of them have had visionary concepts that, had government responded at the time, could have helped us right now. And we're going to look to try to incorporate as many of the ideas as are practical and as are financially achievable so that we can start thinking well into the 21st century and not just to the next budget or the next election.
This program examines the key themes and several specific recommendations contained within this plan. Not all the answers, but some proposals from an organization that has spent many years studying the issues and speaking with people all over the region about what matters to them most. All in a serious effort to foster a regional dialogue about how to make the tri-state region a great place to work, to live, and to raise a family. Our first segment should be of interest to everybody in the region. Transportation, a major focus of the third regional plan. No matter where you live, no matter how you choose to travel, there is one thing everybody can agree on. It's hard to get where you need to go.
Still some delays eastbound side of the Cross Bronx for Webster, but that New Jersey traffic hotspots. We got big troubles on 78 westbound side exit Sloan exit 33 miles.
The time that I spend in the car is about the same as the time that we spend with the kids.
There's really no telling what your normal commute is going to be like. It's that crazy.
Me and my wife both considered moving out of New York altogether.
Time now to check traffic and weather together on the 8th.
WCBS News Time 7:08, Neil Bush, Top 88.
Every morning, somebody gets stuck and significantly stuck. Seeing that dilemma morning after morning, then hearing on the radio about a major corporation who's moving out of New York City. I never find that to be a surprise.
For many years, this region boasted one of the best transportation systems in the world. Today, that system is becoming overloaded and outdated, and cutbacks threaten to make things even worse. Robert Kiley is the former head of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and works with RPA.
It would be wrong to say that there haven't been huge investments in transportation. It happens to be in highways and cars. But the fact is that as a country, we made a series of decisions after World War II not to invest in state-of-the-art, non-automotive transportation alternatives.
Most of those new highways are now clogged, and continuing to build more would be expensive and short-sighted. Other cities in the U.S. and around the world recognize the need for good public transportation. Los Angeles is breaking ground on a brand new subway system. Portland, Oregon recently completed a light rail line, and Tokyo is dramatically expanding its subways. The tri-state area is in danger of being left behind.
The city is unthinkable without the subways. And the buses. They move 5 million people daily. 2 subway lines during rush hour move as many people as 16 lanes of highway. The lifeblood of the city's economy is its transit system. You can't run a business have tourists, have customers, without those folks having a way to get to their jobs and to tourist attractions and to schools and to hospitals.
But a transit system that works needs continuous investment. In the 1970s and 80s, the New York City subway system was in shambles, the result of disastrous cutbacks. Peter Goldmark, now president of the Rockefeller Foundation, chaired the Port Authority from 1977 to 1985.
What is the biggest turnaround that this region has done following the fiscal crisis of the 70s, when we had to prove whether we could make anything better? What is it? It's the resurrection and the improvement of the New York City subway system and some of those key suburban rail lines. Everybody in this region can remember in their guts, in the soles of their feet, in the hours spent late for work, how awful that was. In the late 70s and the early 80s, we turned it around. What's in danger now, because of, I think, mistakes that the governments are making, is that we're going to stop investing in keeping what we've got.
The third regional plan calls for continuing maintenance and upkeep of the subways and commuter rail lines, but it also looks at ways to make our entire transit system work better.
We have a number of transit systems in our region that aren't related to one another. We have New Jersey Transit, we have the PATH system, the Metro North, Long Island Railroad, the subway, the buses. And while the MTA systems sort of come to the same terminals, they're not integrated.
The terminals of the different systems in the region are relatively close to one another, but making the connections can be difficult and time-consuming. Robert Yarrow, executive director of RPA, is chief architect of the third regional plan.
Well, when these systems were built, essentially by the great 19th century robber barons, Cornelius Vanderbilt and his friends, they were in competition with each other. These systems were never designed to work together, to function smoothly, to allow people to get between one place and another, one system and another. Today, it's become clear that the way this region is structured today, that we have to be able to make these connections.
Art Vombas, like thousands of people in the region, takes the train to work. He commutes from Valley Stream, Long Island to the east side of Manhattan.
I get in at Penn Station around 8:25, and from then to get to work, I usually get to work like 5 minutes before 9. So it takes me about 35 minutes to take the two subways across to work. Coming in on the Long Island Railroad, we go right by where I have to go to work pretty much. So, and then they take me 7 avenues out of my way, and then I just have to backtrack with the subway.
Linking the Long Island Railroad directly with the East Side isn't a new idea. In 1970, construction began on a 2-level tunnel. One of the levels was designed to make that connection, and the other to improve subway service.
We're at the end of the 63rd Street Tunnel as it was built in the 1970s. This is the Long Island Railroad level. It was prepared for future use by Long Island Railroad trains operating to a terminal on their 3rd Avenue and 48th Street. Right now, this is the Long Island Railroad level, and it is purely open space.
We spent literally billions of dollars to build a 63rd Street tunnel, but now it just goes one stop and dead ends in Queens. Lack of money and bad planning resulted in that tunnel basically going empty right now.
There's probably not another region on the planet that would invest a couple of $1 billion in a tunnel and then not use it for a quarter of a century. So our simple proposal is to say we built the tunnel, let's use it, and let's use it to get people to where they want to go in less time.
RPA proposes completing the tunnel connecting the Long Island Railroad to Grand Central Station. This would save 40,000 riders up to 30 minutes on their commute, get more drivers off the Long Island Expressway, and benefit Connecticut and upstate commuters by providing an east side link to the Long Island Railroad.
This has become a place that, instead of being the most convenient and easy place to move around in the country, has become one of the most difficult places to move people and goods around in. That's the problem. The solution is to build on the strengths that we have already. We have this remarkable regional rail system that's developed over more than a century. It's unique in North America. It's really the largest of its kind in the world. We've been building as though it didn't exist for the last couple of generations. So the idea is to refocus on this system and to integrate the pieces of it so that they serve the needs of a region that has changed.
The RPA regional rail proposal would build on the existing system of subways and commuter lines to create an integrated regional rail network. The plan proposes 25 miles of new construction, added to the existing 1,250 miles that make up today's system. Highlights include creating an express service to Wall Street from the northern suburbs and a direct line from New Jersey to Long Island. The plan also calls for reviving construction of the long-stalled and controversial 2nd Avenue subway. And this proposal would also address getting to the airport, one of the region's most pressing transportation concerns.
If you were to fly into any European city today, without even naming the city or thinking where you're going, you would just know when you got there that you could get off the plane and get on a train and get to the central city.
RPA proposes building new connections from the Long Island Railroad to Kennedy and LaGuardia airports. A similar link is now under construction to Newark Airport. A rail network will mean less traffic on congested roadways and more choices for commuters like Jose and Sonia Rivera, who drive to work from Teaneck, New Jersey to Long Island City every day.
It's about 18 to 19 miles distance. Without traffic, it's about half an hour, believe it or not. With bumper-to-bumper traffic, which is the norm, it's a good hour.
Congestion could also be eased by using toll discounts to encourage people to use roads at off-peak hours, and using fewer trucks and more rail lines to bring goods into the city. Improving the region's transportation system will cost money, but many experts argue that improving the quality of life in the region will also generate money. Investment banker Felix Rohatyn helped rescue New York City during the fiscal crisis of the 1970s.
Those issues, the quality of life issues and the economic issues are totally related. One of our economic problems is to keep people here, keep business here, keep taxpayers here. And one of the ways to do it is to improve the quality of life.
You either pay now with investment in the system, or you pay later with an unattractive economy, with New York being less competitive than both other American cities and other world cities that are much better served in many ways by their transit systems.
From the Erie Canal to the interstate highways, from the Flushing Local to the Long Island Expressway, transportation has been a defining force in this region. Making the commitment to improve the area's transportation systems will have far-reaching effects on economic development, quality of life, and whether people and businesses want to stay here.
Brown has the ball, drops back. Brown is looking, throws, touchdown!
I think that the best part about living here are the amount of sports that we have, the amount of things that are going on in this area. Summertime, we have the Mets and Yankees. In the winter, we have the Knicks and Rangers and Devils. And there's never a dull moment around here, and I think that's what attracts me to this area, and I think a lot of other people too.
The environment also plays a major role in this region's quality of life. Unspoiled green spaces mean clean water and air for everyone. And a healthy economy depends upon healthy beaches, forests, and lakes. Unfortunately, we haven't always made these connections. The third regional plan outlines the creation and the protection of 11 large open spaces, from the Delaware River to the Long Island Pine Barrens, from the Appalachian Highlands to the Atlantic coast. A so-called metropolitan greensward.
It's not about ducks and birds, it's not about clams or lobsters, but it's about human beings. And that the environmental factors in the air and the water that are necessary for those organisms to live here are also necessary for you to live here.
We have a burgeoning suburban area. The growth has gone out and out and out and out, but the need hasn't changed for people to have that open space.
If you have clean beaches, you can attract tourists forever. If you have clean bays and clean sound and ocean, you can fish forever. If you don't abuse insecticides, you can farm forever. If all you're going to do is build, you're going to run out of space, and your economy and your environment are going down.
This is sewage treatment plant sludge in here. It's mixed in with the flotsam from the high tide line.
10 years ago, Connecticut's most valuable natural resource was imperiled. Today, Long Island Sound is recovering thanks to the efforts of people like Connecticut State Representative Terry Backer and his watchdog group, Soundkeeper.
This water body is part of the natural life support system for everything that lives around here, including people. Within 100 miles of Long Island Sound, there's probably 10% of the American population, 20 million plus people. You have 300,000 anglers, 200,000 registered boats, millions of beachgoers. 10 years ago, they would have been rowing through rafts of human sewage here.
Yeah, it's sitting right on where the high tide was.
Soundkeeper and other citizens groups have used public outreach, constant monitoring, and legal action to bring attention to pollution in the Sound. Government and the business community have joined the effort to keep this vital body of water clean. As a result, Long Island Sound now generates more than $5 billion annually.
"20 years ago, we were closing oyster ground in Long Island Sound, and today we find ourselves in many places opening new areas. The cultivated oyster fishery here is the largest on the eastern seaboard. We're landing as many lobsters as any place in Maine per mile of shoreline right here.
Terry, I think I see some sewage in the water over here.
The reclamation of Long Island Sound is far from over. The Sound is still affected by urban runoff from roads, bridges, and factories, and visitors do not have easy access to the shoreline. Solving these problems is good for both the environment and the economy.
We have a lot more to do here. Vigilance is the price of keeping this water body intact and coming up with good planning for long-term solutions to these problems. And so the advancements we made can all be lost very quickly. Yet when it comes to making the political decisions and investing in the future of this water body, both states are starting to say it's too expensive. But it's really too expensive not to do what we need to do.
And I see another animal sunning himself. That's an eastern painted turtle, one of the common turtle species you'll find in the Pine Barrens. Can you see him sunning on the log? Why is the turtle doing that?
To get warmer, because they're cold-blooded animals.
To get warm.
Cold-blooded animals.
Right.
Located on the eastern end of the island, the Long Island Pine Barrens is another natural area that once faced destruction. A few years ago, this 100,000-acre ecosystem was threatened by industry, residential subdivisions, and strip malls. Water reserves beneath the barrens, containing 15 trillion gallons of Long Island's drinking water, faced contamination. Richard Amper directs the Pine Barrens Society.
If a population is to get its drinking water from underground, clearly you have to concern yourself about what you're doing on the surface. A strip shopping center here, a residential subdivision over there. We began paving over the areas outside the city of New York. The same real estate development that was threatening drinking water and habitat and the whole quality of life on eastern Long Island was also destroying Long Island's economy. Every time we build a residential subdivision, yes, the land stays on the tax rolls, but when people move in, the cost of paying for services there is much, much higher, which is why people in this region are paying more money in taxes than any place else in the country.
The struggle to save the Pine Barrens began in 1977, when 3 high school students formed the Pine Barrens Society.
They look a little bit like members of the pea family, like the groundnut we saw.
John Turner was one of those students.
I remember vividly one particular summer in the mid-1970s. We spent almost every weekend day exploring one section or the other of the Pine Barrens. And we were like kids in a proverbial candy shop. I love to take school groups through the Pine Barrens. In fact, the kids really seem to be charged when they come out here. Oftentimes, one of the kids said today that they just didn't know what they had available to them. Now, having tried these berries, I have to tell you, they're not particularly good.
In 1989, the Pine Barrens Society, along with 125 other citizens groups, took action.
The Pine Barrens Society initiated the largest environmental lawsuit in the history of the state of New York, which on a single day stopped 234 residential and commercial development projects valued at $11.2 billion.
The lawsuit prompted local municipalities to assess the collective impact of these projects on the environment.
Each one of those may not have had a significant impact upon the Pine Barrens, but there's no doubt that collectively, if they were all to have gone forward, they would have utterly destroyed the resources and the communities that make up the Pine Barrens.
This was just a very clear case of where the people of Long Island said, the pavement stops here.
In government and in life, there is a very fine and important balance that you have to reach. And with this legislation, and with today the adoption of the comprehensive land use plan, we are putting in place a critical element of that balance.
With technical advice from RPA, builders, citizens, and government reached an agreement to limit development and preserve the remaining Pine Barrens. In 1995, New York Governor George Pataki witnessed the agreement, which has become a model for regional preservation.
The Long Island Pine Barrens are a good example of the type of consortium that has to be pulled together.
Chris Daggett is a former environmental commissioner of New Jersey and an RPA board member.
The competing groups got together, and sure enough, it was not easy, but people figured out a way to both preserve the pine lands, but also to have some economic growth and development occur.
What worked here was not just people coming together to accommodate one another. It was not the predominance of the environment over the economy or vice versa. It was that for the first time, people on Long Island were planning. And once they sat down together and said, this is what we want Eastern Long Island to look like in the future, they had a plan. Before they had a plan, they didn't have a clue and they didn't have a prayer.
A similar partnership has been formed to protect the watershed in upstate New York, which provides the drinking water for New York City and Westchester County. A new understanding between citizens and government has led to conservation and sewage treatment programs that will not only protect the water, but avoid the need to build a $6 billion filtration system.
I think the Watershed Accord is a win-win situation. For the water consumers in New York City, we are guaranteed well into the next century protections of this water supply system. Upstate become stewards of this system by having New York City invest in solving some of their water quality problems, in solving some of their local development problems. You can't sustain an urban environment like New York City unless, in fact, we began to pay attention to what it took to sustain our upstate communities.
17,000-acre Sterling Forest, located in the Appalachian Highlands of New York and New Jersey, is a water source for 2 million New Jersey residents.
And we would be locating our school facilities, convenience retail facilities.
But if current plans to develop the forest become reality, the area will be filled with houses, golf courses, and office buildings. Although the planned development is in New York, both New York and New Jersey have pledged $10 million to save the forest and petitioned the federal government for $17.5 million more.
Sterling Forest naturally cleanses the water supply for some 2 million New Jerseyans, and it does this for a song. If we lose the forest to development, expensive treatment plants will take its place, and New Jersey taxpayers would feel the pain and pay the price. That would be crazy. Once again, the right environmental choice is also the best economic choice.
The ongoing attempt to preserve Sterling Forest is a good example of regional thinking.
We have entered into a new era in which government, business, industry, and environmental organizations will have to join together to protect our natural resources while fostering beneficial growth.
If we don't protect the open spaces that we have, the quality of life is going to suffer. Businesses aren't going to come here with jobs. People aren't going to want to move here. And in the end, we all suffer.
Just as the people of Connecticut and New York worked together to reclaim the Sound, and Long Islanders joined forces to protect the Pine Barrens, the creation and protection of the Metropolitan Greensward, outlined in RPA's third regional plan, relies on the cooperation of everyone.
Repeat after me. I hereby declare on oath.
We speak the language of the world. The world's foremost cosmopolitan city has an ability to capture the enormous energy, creative energy of people who have come here to seek a better lives for themselves, like my parents and my grandparents. They came to New York looking for something better. And little could they have imagined that their grandson would be the 11th borough president of the Bronx.
At this moment, you're officially citizens of the United States.
Region at Risk, a plan for our future. Examining a long-range, comprehensive blueprint for the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area. Once again, Chuck Scarborough.
Throughout our region, low-skilled employment is disappearing, replaced by jobs that require more complex training and often an understanding of computer technology. But are we prepared for those jobs? Nearly 3 million adults in the region are functionally illiterate, and even well-educated workers can find it difficult to keep pace with the changing job market. Unless we find new ways to educate our workforce, many people are going to be left behind. The third regional plan recognizes the need for continuous education and retraining and connecting people and communities to jobs.
My country 'tis of thee.
These students at PS 230 in Brooklyn are ready to learn. But when the time comes, will they be ready to work?
Until fairly recently, let's say until a decade or so ago, we had an unwritten social contract in this country. And the notion was that if you stayed in school, you were entitled to a job that would enable you to support yourself and your family and probably stay with that job in that company and that industry for a lifetime or close to it. I mean, now the notion is that just you do the right things and you're not entitled to much of anything.
You will have 24 minutes to do this test.
By the time you begin to think about where should this 11th grader go after his 12th year if he's not going to college, or where should this college sophomore think about going after he or she graduates from college, by the time you start to think about those issues, if you can't communicate effectively, if you know nothing about technology or computers, it's too late.
The role of schools is to prepare students for the future. But in schools throughout the region, students leave with little or no job training. This is especially true in underfunded urban schools where 1 out of 3 students doesn't graduate. In order to find and keep jobs, these students must make education a lifelong process. Jill Considine is a former New York State Superintendent of Banks and an RPA board member.
Things are changing at too rapid a pace to assume that things that were learned in school will last us for the next 40 years. They're probably not going to last for 40 months these days. And we have to ensure that there's continuing education of our workforce.
Because it is clear that education and skills will be for the future as basic as having an automobile to move or a house to live in or any of the other essential elements of life. Being skilled, having a match between one's skills and the job opportunities will determine whether people can succeed or not.
In low-income communities like the South Bronx, a potential workforce is being left behind.
Most of the people in this community want more than anything else to work in a job where they can make a living wage.
Richard Kahn advises RPA and is president of the Urban Assembly, which is currently planning construction and development projects in the Melrose section of the South Bronx.
We need a much broader reinterpretation of what education means. Its ultimate objective has to be to get everyone who possibly can into a productive job at a living wage. That means people of all ages, people who need retraining, people who have been displaced by technology, as well as people in the public and private school system.
Inner city neighborhoods like Melrose are often isolated from training and job placement programs.
Most people in this country find jobs either by going directly to the workplace or through a personal reference system, their friends and relatives. And these people are isolated from the economic mainstream. They're physically cut off through the transportation system, which makes it very difficult to get to where the jobs are being created in this region.
As much as we might want to develop the South Bronx, it probably is never going to have in the foreseeable future the rate of job growth that exists today in the suburban communities, at the airport, in the loops, in the interstate highway system, in the manufacturing and research parks and office parks. And we have to give people an opportunity to get a job in those places, which means setting up the training and the commuting programs and others to do it.
Wasting all of these human beings is something we simply can't afford, whether we view it as right or wrong. It's clearly wrong, but we can't afford it.
The word is irregular. Super.
Without high school diploma or without any education, it's really rough for people. Even with the high school diploma, nowadays it's really like nothing.
Catherine Roman is training to become a child care professional at the New Community Corporation in Newark, New Jersey. Such programs are one answer to the region's workforce problems.
Do you know the song?
Yes. I'm working to become a preschool teacher and to be somebody. That's it. Just get off public assistance.
What do you want to be?
A lawyer.
A lawyer? Another lawyer?
Monsignor William Linder heads the new community corporation.
I think in trying to obtain a really contemporary workforce, the first problem is really one that is not particularly necessary to center city. It's the fact that we have very user-unfriendly systems of continuing education and training. And we need to talk about entry-level training, and then we need to talk about a very user-friendly, on-site training through a person's career so that they are always developing, they always have options in their life, and they are always growing.
In the past 2 years, the new community corporation has placed 700 people in steady jobs. The program has been successful because of a close partnership with government and the business community.
We have very good government cooperation. We also do a lot of work in partnerships. We have some of the major corporations in the state participating with us, including Prudential, including Johnson & Johnson, firms like that, who are helping us develop programs.
The need for lifelong training is not confined to the inner city.
The layoff is the second major reduction in staff at Sikorsky this year. 350 white-collar workers were issued pink slips in June.
In the 80s, we became spoiled, fat, dumb, and happy, if you will, because Aetna and Travelers and the Hartford and United Technologies and Electric Boat, they were taking care of generations of people.
Between 1989 and 1994, Connecticut alone lost 72,000 jobs. Retraining programs have become an important factor in putting people back to work.
We're going for high-tech research and development, biomedical research, telecommunications areas. We've got everybody from the Connecticut Business and Industry to the AFL-CIO working on this package. We're bringing in the private sector and, of course, our university, so everybody's working together. So the best social program in the world is still a job.
While local models for successful education programs exist, RPA's third regional plan advocates applying these programs on a regional scale. A capable workforce can only be built if business, labor, government, and citizens work together to create good schools, access to jobs, and the lifelong education required to keep those jobs.
I think that New York City definitely is the cultural capital of the world. That makes this a very special city in the sense that it's a huge cultural pie with every sort of ingredient in it that makes this city so unique. Culture is not so much necessary as it is vital. Without it, a city or a metropolis has no soul. So it is vital that the city stay culturally alive. Remember that the culture in the city also contributes to paying the rent for an awful lot of people. So it becomes an economic necessity as well as one of the soul.
This region's cities are home to first-class cultural institutions, leaders in the arts and business communities, and perhaps the most diverse population in the world. But cities have changed. A century ago, they were built around ports and great manufacturing industries. Over the last 40 years, however, much of the growth in jobs and housing has been in the suburbs. And frequently, politicians and planners have fostered the division between cities and suburbs. The third regional plan calls for going beyond that notion to recognize the region's interdependence.
With the nation needing millions of dwellings immediately, the President labored long and hard for constructive housing legislation.
Government policies like the GI housing bill and the construction of the interstate highway system encouraged the explosion of suburban growth in this region. But that growth has had its costs.
What's happened over the years is that jobs and offices and people have moved outward from the cities and abandoned the infrastructure of the cities. But as they've done that, they've chewed up all of the green space, and then we abandon the investment in the infrastructure and in the urban center, and the jobs are gone. And to provide decent jobs for people, we've got to focus on developing our urban centers. Every other country in the world is doing this. But we better wake up.
Downtown Brooklyn in the 1980s was losing jobs and vitality. In 1990, ground was broken on the Metro Tech Center, an office complex proposed by RPA, whose tenants include Chase Manhattan and Brooklyn Union Gas.
And with the Metro Tech Center down here, it's helping Brooklyn a lot, and hopefully it'll change, for this borough.
This strategy of keeping cities economically sound benefits the entire region.
New York City is the engine that drives the region's economy. I'll give you one way to view it. New York City produces 40% of the income in Nassau County, 40% of the income in Westchester County, and 40% of the income in Bergen County. So this is the engine that supports the entire region.
Maintaining the city's strength means adapting to meet the changing needs of new industries. Lower Manhattan has struggled with high vacancy rates since the recession of the late 80s, and its trademark skyscrapers are in danger of becoming obsolete.
We have to take the buildings, which are old buildings, and therefore not able to handle advanced technology. Many of them have to be rebuilt and rewired and be made into smart buildings, buildings that can handle present technology. And we offer now incentives, both tax and financing incentives, to accomplish that.
55 Broad Street housed the offices of Drexel Burnham Lambert. But since that company's bankruptcy in 1990, the building has been vacant. It's now being rewired with the help of the incentive program to offer an advanced telecommunications infrastructure and attract tenants in the new fields of multimedia.
There's 7 separate telecommunication systems contained within this riser. This building is the ultimate global connection, and it's this telecommunication system that provides our tenants with bandwidth on demand.
More residential housing and, above all, better transportation would also improve Lower Manhattan.
This importance of cities is not just restricted to New York City. It is just as true of New Brunswick and Newark, of Stamford and Bridgeport, and of Poughkeepsie and Newburgh. We've got to revitalize all of our urban centers if we're going to meet the other goals of the Third Regional Plan.
Newark, New Jersey was the scene of devastating riots in the late 1960s and has been synonymous with urban decay. But Newark is now experiencing a renaissance. Huge development projects like a performing arts center are coupled with smaller grassroots efforts. Committed Newark residents are working with organizations such as the Greater Newark Conservancy to turn vacant lots into green spaces.
There's a tremendous amount of need and there is a tremendous amount of ambition within these blocks in Newark. We have over 72 blocks right now involved in different beautification projects.
Basically, I just wanted to have something nice to look out of my window because this field was just weeds and just scrub, and it depressed me, so I just wanted to have something nice to look at,
It beautifies the neighborhood. A lot of times, because you're showing so much interest in your own block, it will help reduce crime. People will see that there's an interest, that there is a cohesive group that's living in this area, and they'll stay away, the criminals.
One of the strengths that Newark is building on is its varied neighborhoods. The Ironbound district has resisted the trends of white flight and deterioration that have plagued so many of the city's other neighborhoods.
The Ironbound community, first of all, it gets its name from it being surrounded by railroad tracks, literally. It's an ever-changing community, immigrants coming here all the time. Yet at the same time, in the midst of all those changes, you still have a very stable community. Working class people coming here, struggling, working hard.
Joe Delafave is the director of the Ironbound Community Corporation, which offers adult education, senior citizen, and daycare programs.
We're also very much a grassroots organization, and we have tried to keep it like that throughout the years, where people who use the programs also make decisions in those programs.
Because we definitely need that.
Well, everything else is the same. After school,
Mary Jo Rapp moved back to the Ironbound from the suburbs.
Most of the people in the town where I came from didn't even know their neighbors. Nobody was involved with each other. Everybody was in their own little world. And here, they're actually concerned.
There's a lot of good people here, people that aren't leaving. But there's been a serious disinvestment of both services and money into the city. The state of New Jersey wants to build a whole new city in the meadowlands of Secaucus, take away, fill in wetlands, rather than invest that money in Newark, Elizabeth, Jersey City, the cities that already have the infrastructure, have the land, need the jobs, need the money into their economy.
One of the vital industrial centers of the United States is Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Bridgeport, Connecticut was once a center of manufacturing and a thriving city. But most of those industries are now gone, leaving behind high unemployment and abandoned factories.
Bridgeport was a city built for 19th century industry. Those old factories are the heritage, but they're also the major problem.
Reclaiming abandoned industrial sites in urban centers is key to their revitalization.
What we should be doing is going to where those old factories are and cleaning up the environmental problems there, and then inviting businesses to come in. The businesses are going to come in. They're going to do two wonderful things. They're going to create jobs for people who live in urban areas. And the second thing they're going to do is they're going to pay taxes. So ultimately, cities can become independent again.
There are no magic walls that are built around all these issues. If we don't solve the problems of Bridgeport or Hartford, the crime rates will go up in other communities, the financial problems will plague other communities.
Cities have always represented the center of vitality, the centers for creativity, the centers for change, places where people can go and make a contribution and be a part of something bigger than life.
Cities have posed challenges to their age, and yet cities continue to exist because people do come together for a whole variety of reasons. What the RPA is trying to do is to define the cities of the next century, and that's a challenge to all of us.
It is in cities where we learn to live together, to succeed together. Thriving cities are engines of growth, generating jobs and opportunities throughout the area. Struggling cities drain hope from their residents and resources from the entire region. The challenge for the future is to ensure that the tremendous resources of these urban centers aren't wasted.
If you would like to participate in a computer online discussion about the Third Regional Plan, the New York Times will be hosting a question and answer session tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Go to the New York Times service on America Online, Thursday at 8 p.m.
We've just seen some ways to make our region better. But moving from ideas to reality will take a lot of hard work. And it won't be cheap. Applying all of the regional plan proposals could cost as much as $75 billion over the next 25 years. And this is where government can play an important role. Improving the way government operates could save a great deal of money, which could be spent improving our region. In order for that to happen, however, all of our different governmental bodies in our states, counties, towns, and villages must first begin to act like a region.
We need to start thinking of ourselves as a common market. That's what we are. Over 20 million people, 31 counties. We're the largest single common market in the United States.
The plan put forward by the Regional Plan Association is based entirely on the assumption that we have the capacity to work together as a greater community, and that government is a vital part of this, because that's how we work together. If that assumption is wrong or doesn't work, then we can rip up the plan and put it away, and we should never do another one based on that assumption.
This region is comprised of 3 states, 31 counties, 750 municipalities, all with their own governments. In total, there are more than 2,000 units of government in this region.
There's a lot of savings that I think can be generated from governance, how we actually govern, getting more efficiency into government, eliminating some of the waste, looking at duplication that we have.
Government services overlap in some areas and fall short in others when neighboring communities fail to cooperate.
Whether it's a Bridgeport community, whether it's the Hartford community and the surrounding towns, when they start to share resources ranging from sewers and water to environmental protection to police, when they do it and they come to agreement, it works.
Sharing services is just one way to reduce the nearly $100 billion the region's governments spend each year.
If we look at the $100 billion, about $12 billion is in infrastructure. We could probably save about 10% through efficiencies per year That's $1.2 billion. If we look at the other $80 billion, which is just sort of services that are provided through efficiencies, elimination of waste, we could probably save another 5%. So we can be generating another $4 billion there.
The region could save up to half of the estimated $1 billion spent every year in border wars between states.
And we're heavily into economic abuse of one another with these silly, pointless, self-defeating games that we play. No, I'm going to take your business across the river 500 feet. And I'm going to have a big win for us because now we'll get your little piece of the taxes. So the other side says, well, we'll give away the store in order to keep you here. It really is kind of pathetic.
While the pressure is on us to look out for the interests of the constituents that put us in office, part of that involves making sure that we use the resources that they've committed to us effectively. If we keep trading jobs back and forth across a border, we're not going to have the money that we need to pay for the things that people really want.
The regional plan also advocates an annual meeting of the region's 3 governors to discuss regional issues, a tri-state congressional coalition to work together in Washington, and restructuring public authorities like the Port Authority and the MTA to better meet the region's needs.
Here, for the first time, we've got 3 Republican governors, a Republican mayor. They ought to be working together rather than working against each other.
We are a region that we're not interested in the business of stealing from one another.
We can build off one another's strengths. We can use those strengths, and we've seen some troubled times. It argues for working together even more closely to send that message when you're looking to attract businesses from other parts of the country and around the world.
The tri-state region has been moving together and improving the communities for all probably the same reasons, to keep businesses here, to keep people here, to get the economy growing again.
As we move to the 21st century, it's very important that we work in a cooperative spirit, that we have a regional concept, and that we have a vision of investment in everything from the infrastructure to the environment that is not limited by state boundaries, but recognizes the unique needs of the entire region.
Cooperation and efficient government spending can turn the $75 billion regional plan into reality.
$75 billion is a lot of money if you look at it as $75 billion at once. But we're talking about $75 billion spread over the next 25 years. Now, that averages out to about $3 billion a year. And we're currently spending close to $100 billion a year. So that's 3%.
Although taxes and fees may have to be increased, much of the regional plan could pay for itself through savings and economic growth.
In the richest region in the world with a $600 billion economy, I have to believe that we can find the will to make the investments we need to make over the next generation.
In the past, governors have kind of kept their distance and kind of fended off any cooperation or work. And we can't afford to do that any longer.
We tend to look on issues in this day and age as zero-sum game. Somebody's got to lose for somebody to win. People rarely look at it as something that everybody can come away a little better and we can all win if we work together for the solution.
I'm very optimistic that Governor Rowland and Governor Whitman and I have that regional concept. We have that understanding that we all do well if we all work to make this succeed as a region. And as we look at the RPA's 3rd plan, I'm sure we will be continuing to have a dialogue as to how we can cooperatively make the entire region stronger.
So now we've learned about the major proposals in the 3rd regional plan. It's important for all of us to remember that this is not the end of a process. Rather, it's just the beginning. Now it's up to us, the citizens of this region, to determine how we want to move forward, improving transportation and protecting our environment, ensuring jobs for the future, and revitalizing our cities and government. None of this will happen unless we first begin a regional dialogue. Gary Wendt, the head of GE Capital, is also chairman of the board of RPA.
What the citizens and the business community and the politicians have to do now is think. Think about how to take all this wonderful research that's been done, all this data that's been collected, all these recommendations that have been thought through, and put them into action. The first thing is to think, and then it's time to get going on implementing some of these conclusions.
Too often, I think, all of us, particularly elected officials, take for granted the things that we have now that were the result of visionary thinking in the past. My family and I have gone many times to Jones Beach and taken the highway to Jones Beach, and this was something that 50 or 60 years ago was someone's vision of allowing the public to have access to the magnificent shoreline in our great region. We have to have that same vision for the future.
3 cheers for those who sit down and plan and think about the future rather than themselves in the present. Isn't that what we're saying when we say we want politicians who will stand up and demand what's right, not just for now, but what's right 20 or 30 years from now or 100 years from now?
We don't today have the political will to carry out the agenda that the next millennium requires, large parts of which are contained in this report. That doesn't mean we can't have it. That doesn't mean we can't build it. That's the immediate task, and this report may help us organize to do that, to generate and build that political will. And that includes not only leadership, that includes followership. And those of us who are citizens in this region have to get clearer on what we want.
Clearly, we have a great deal of work to do if we want the tri-state New York, New Jersey, Connecticut region to remain a truly great place to work, to live, and to raise a family. I'm Chuck Scarborough. Thank you for joining us.
If you would like to comment on this program or receive additional information about the 3rd Regional Plan and RPA, call the toll-free telephone number on your screen. Principal funding has been provided by Consolidated Edison Company of New York, Forbes Magazine, Deloitte & Touche, the Blackstone Group, Brooklyn Union Gas, Donaldson, Lufkin & Jenrette, and the Equitable Life Assurance Society of the United States. If you would like to participate in a computer online discussion about the 3rd Regional Plan, the New York Times will be hosting a question and answer session tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Go to the New York Times service on America Online, Thursday at 8 p.m.